Guys, welcome to this webinar. We're going to go ahead and kick it off and talk about the HR, the marketing, and the grant writing, the nonprofit leadership trifecta. And I know you're probably wearing all four. I don't know there's a number for 4 hats and 5 hats, but welcome everybody. I'm going to show you how you can engage. My name is Aretha Simons. I'm the webinar producer here. You already know that you are mute, so we would love you put your questions in the Q&A. We're going to send you this video replay and the slides later today or early in the morning. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We have lots of team members who are going to grab them, but you know how fast the chat goes. So it's up to you. We love to see your questions. So I'm going to turn this over to one of the co-founders of Tapp Network. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for being here today. Over to you.
Thanks, Aretha. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joe DiGiovanni. I'm the co-founder of Tapp Network. We're a marketing technology and AI digital transformation firm, and we're partners with TechSoup, as many of you already know. So if you go to TechSoup, click on services and look at website service, digital marketing, or AI for nonprofits, we're the folks that partner with TechSoup to provide those services. We're super excited today. We do 2 webinars a month with TechSoup, and with this format today, we're excited to try something new where we're bringing in experts in the field where technology, touches the nonprofits, especially for folks wearing many hats. So with us today, we have, next slide, please. We have Peggy Geisler. She's the founder of PMG Consulting and executive director of multiple nonprofits, including Sussex County Health Coalition, and Whitney Herrington. She's the CEO and founder of Ascend People. So I'll have both of these experts introduce themselves. We only have 45 minutes today, so part of the goal today is to really give you an idea of how they can support you and what you could do, tools, and then you could reach out to each one of these experts afterwards as well to take a deeper dive. Peggy?
All right, I'm Peggy Geisler, Senior Consultant with PMG Consulting. Thanks, Joe, so much. I'm excited to get started today. I've wore all the hats. So the hats that you were talking about earlier, Retha, I've worn them all. And I help other people with their hats and making sure their productivity and what they do in the community has impact. And so I will hand it over to Whitney and let her introduce herself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. I'm Whitney Herrington. I am the CEO and founder of Ascend People, and we are an HR consulting firm that exclusively serves nonprofits across the country. I have also worn a ton of hats in operational across different nonprofits, and I'm based here in the DC area. So it's really great to be here, and I'm happy to share all my wisdom and knowledge to be helpful.
Great. Thanks, Peggy and Whitney. So just quickly, today's agenda, we'll go through the funding lens, really all about resource development and grant writing and grant development. And then Whitney will discuss HR as an execution infrastructure. And then I'll go through how marketing ties these three together, especially technology, where we have a loop and all these can really fuel each other. And then we'll answer some questions and looking forward to today's presentation. So I'll hand it over to Peggy.
Great. Thanks, Joe. So we can go to the next slide. So there's a couple things. There's a lot of stuff we have to go through in a short period of time. So I'm going to hit some high level. Want to talk about what the funding reality is like. And it really has to do with your performance. If you have street cred within the work that you do. So execution reliability, what is that previous performance and are people aware? One of the shortcomings of most organizations is not allowing others to know their success. They're so busy doing the work, they don't celebrate it. Leadership stability. Do you have a pathway for your leadership? Has your leaders been in place for a while? Is there someone to take their place when they matriculate out? This is really important when you're thinking about the RFP process, who's going to be on point and who are going to be the individuals within the grant that you're going to be using to get the work done. Your measurable outcomes, clarity on short-term, long-term. And it's important here when you're looking at a grant, is it a 1-year grant? Is it a 2-year grant? Is it a 5-year grant? Oftentimes people promise the moon on a 1-year grant, which we know is not always possible. And so you have to be real clear about what it is you can achieve in short periods of time versus long-term and phasing so that it looks or it demonstrates to the person rating the grant exactly what you can accomplish within each segment of time. And in between, creating milestones that they can see. And then a lot of times organizations do that in a way that's more output oriented, not outcome oriented. And so if you need help in that area, we can also help you in thinking through that. Reporting discipline, more can actually be better. And what I mean by that is answering their question, but also solving in your report future problems that could be coming up by including some ideas so that the funder could be interested in funding more as you go down the pipeline. And what I mean by that is including something that says, with the right funding and more time, we would be able to, and giving that in a report to start to pique their interest in what else your organization could do. And communication consistency, meeting deadlines, that's the minimum. But maybe creating an interim where you're giving them updates on what's happening, good or bad. A lot of funders really do appreciate that. Next slide. So what do funders actually want to fund? They really are looking at some risk mitigation or prevention. They're interested in understanding how your programming not only addresses the current needs, but sets up possibly systems or ways to think about addressing future needs. Predictability. I think they also really appreciate visual anchors. Many times we are steeped in the genre of what we're working on, but what we don't do is allow them the visual cues needed to help them identify what we're working on. And that goes a long way for a funder. Scalability, alluding that what you're doing can be and should be scaled, actually helps plant the seed for more funding in the future. So by saying that, this could be a pilot, or we're going to do this if we do it well, we'll be able to market it and get more resources to scale and reach even more people with the valuable services you provide. Governance maturity, that depends on the funder. There are funders who really are interested in funding startups, funders interested in maintaining quality program, and funders interested in enhancing program that's there. Make sure you start to understand the funder and understand what they like to fund so that whatever you're applying for, whether it's a private foundation, an RFP for the state, or even federal, that you're actually applying for what it is they're going to want to fund. And then outcome visibility. What happens a lot of times is we don't put out there what was the end and how it changed the community in some way. And if you don't do that, not just with the funder, but with others, you will oftentimes find it harder to continue to get funding from those organizations. So what are some things that the funders look at? And trust me, depending on the state, funders talk to each other. They talk to each other nationally. They talk to each other regionally. They definitely talk to each other within the state. If they are noticing interruptions in your organization, a lot of staff turnover, or interruptions in services that are unexplained. If your data isn't organized or consistent and isn't showcased somewhere on your website, if your reporting is delayed, that usually is a capacity issue, right? If there's unclear ownership between what you're doing and what partners are doing in the community, if your role isn't clear within that partnership, oftentimes they'll make assumptions that this is something multiple people are doing, or if they're doing it multiple, you might not be the lead. And that's really important. Or reactive communication. You're only out there responding when there's a problem instead of out there leading the charge. And I think, Joe will talk about that later. It's really important for you to be the ones leading the charge sometimes. Okay, next slide. So renewal strategy or operational strategy. I think the important things that I hear from funders, and I work with quite a few, is that many of them, believe it or not, do like to get updates. Doesn't have to be long, could be in an email. If you have something that gets posted in the news, if you have anything like that, send it to the funder just saying FYI. Doesn't have to be long or drawn out. It just keeps you on their radar. You want to document your progress, even if it isn't moving as fast as you would like within the grant, making sure that they understand if something gets stalled, if funding in another area impacts what they're funding. Um, Incorporate that, keep them informed so they know what's going on. I think that's really important. Strong relationship management. Most of the funders, you don't get funded right away. You have to start a relationship with them prior to getting the funding. That is also in the state. That means being in the room. And, many people will say, well, we don't have time to be in the room. Well, then that's a great place for your board. Teach them how to be in the room, teach them how to advocate. That's where resource development starts way before an RFP. Clean reporting history, making sure that you are delivering in your report what the funder really wants to see. They love it when you give them all this subjective information. They love the story, they love the emotional, but they also want to make sure that you give them clear on information on the deliverables you promised, whether they're outputs, outcomes, or even just indicators that load on the outcomes. Visible impact over time, progression in a visual way, a representation, a journey map on where you are so that, they'll hear it, but to see it, it resonates better in your report. So don't just give them data, give them visual anchors with the data if it's possible so that they can see how this progressed, timelines it progressed, what your outcomes and milestones and your in-between milestones are, because this makes them feel the movement and makes them feel more confident in you as a provider. Next slide. So just an example, I started wooing a foundation longwood probably 10 years ago when I was green. In this journey with this funder, they're the largest funder in Delaware. I was not ready for their application, but I thought I was. And I went through the process and I realized just how not ready I was. So we started a relationship, signed up for everything we could sign up for, made sure we were integrated. And then when we were ready, we went back and applied for our first grant with them, which was $450,000, which we got awarded to start an innovation hub in rural Sussex County, Delaware. Because of that and our ability to operationalize, as you can see through the pictures, I kept the funder notified. I invited him down for a walkthrough. I kept him up to date on where we were with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we also reapplied for additional work to go on after we launched this, and we incorporated that information in our application about our track record, and we're able to get a solid $750,000 to build out the workforce out of this innovation hub. But this actually started 10 years ago with the relationships, the discussions, and the first failure. So even with state, foundational, or community-based organizations, it takes time to really build this kind of work, especially when you're looking for larger foundation grants or even state grants. You have to put in the time and effort and the proof. Next slide. So one way to help you cheat when you're doing multiple, and when I say cheat, it means shave off time when you're doing multiple grants. Right now I have 15 grants on my desk for the next 2 months. And the way I'm getting to it is I'm triaging what is the most viable and I'm ranking them. Those are the ones I'm doing first. I have a grant file that I keep online where all my forms, federal, state, or local forms are for all the funds that I want to apply for so that I have it ready at my fingertips, so that saves time. I pre-fill out all my forms with the exception of the things that are needed, right? And then I have templates ready because they all use similar templates. Your budget templates, your milestone templates, your logic models. And I have some of those things also prepped and ready. I use AI to create all my letters of support and templates for that to give out to partners. I use AI to help me with research to put in around national models and data. So I get all my data I use through AI, and I'm sure Joe can talk all about that kind of stuff. And then when I write stuff, I actually use Chat GPT and other forms to help me create my narratives better. So AI can work in conjunction as extra staff to help you get done what you need to do when you have multiple grants through foundations, because the foundations, the federal and the state, are all linked in the same months and month cycles, and it can feel overwhelming. So you need to work smarter, not harder. So I'm going to stop there, Joe, and I'm sure we're going to have time for questions at the end of these presentations.
Great. Thanks, Peggy. That was excellent, and it really helps lead into Whitney's expertise because it's critical to have that human infrastructure and human resources to drive these grants, to apply for these grants, and to really show the impact and everything in between. So I'll hand it over to Whitney now, and she can go through her side of the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yes, like when we think about HR, I know that it can be the thing that you want to think about least, but I often feel like it's probably more central to the work that you're doing, whether it's your job or not, right? And so if you are a supervisor, if you are a leader in the organization, if you're engaging with your coworkers, there's always a component of this that is undergirding what you're doing. So I want to talk about the importance of HR and how that shows up and how you execute your infrastructure, and thinking about like where capacity breaks first, where the HR strain really becomes more fragility for your organization, and then what actual like strategic HR looks like and how it across functions, across many functions in your organization. So there's a lot of things, right, that can create issues in your organization. And as it relates to HR, there's a few things that I wanted to highlight here that I'm sure for many of you will feel very common, right, and feel like it resonates with your experience. When I think about capacity strain, I often feel like it begins with ambiguity, right? You are working on a lot of things. You might be in a space of a lot of growth. There's a lot of people around. There's a lot of things you're trying to do. And then particularly in these times when there's so much chaos going on in the world, right, your work can even seem even more strained. And so when we are operating in those types of environments and roles are not clearly defined or decision rights are fuzzy, the work slows down, right? People waste time for getting approvals or will overstep unintentionally, creating duplicate efforts. And so I think that this drag can really compound quickly as an organization grows. When we have when supervisors lack some of the HR training or even just having solid processes that help them in their work, I think the management for people can be really reactive, right? And that can take time. So you usually will have things like performance issues that are addressed too late, if at all, where you have feedback that's not being documented and having conflict that simmers and starts to boil over in ways that can be super distracting for the organization. These things can create inequities, right, in your work, frustration, and sometimes, unfortunately, legal risk. And many times, leaders are spending a disproportionate amount of time managing people crises more than actually doing the work, right, of the mission of the organization. Further, I think that there are several nonprofits, right, who rely heavily on the like 1 to 2 people who hold everything, right? And so that can be okay for a short period of time, but when those types of systems and processes live in someone's head, versus being documented, versus being kind of delegated across the organization, your organization can be extremely vulnerable when folks leave or someone takes PTO or someone is just burnt out where they can't contribute at 100% any longer. Another area where we see capacity breaking is around compliance, and compliance is often overlooked before until it becomes urgent, and possibly expensive. So when you have missing documentation, outdated policies, inconsistent practices, or not even like registering in the right places at the right time, these things create risk exposure. So I often see a lot of orgs who are cleaning up of avoidable messes, and it takes a lot to do so. And then the last piece that I see the strain where capacity comes through is when compensation is not competitive, or it may not be internally equitable, right? So you might have started, hiring folks and you just kind of were giving money away in the way you felt like made most sense. But then, as you bring people on, right, you're unable to maintain those types of things and you start to see disparities. I think that you will often find when those things happen that folks aren't usually willing or able to effectively contribute when they're not paid appropriately. So let's move to the next slide. So HR strain becomes organizational fragility when these things happen, right? And the HR strains that we just talked about are not isolated issues. When they're left unaddressed, they create this fragility. And so leadership becomes the bottleneck where work will stall, right? Burnout becomes the norm and it can affect productivity. Equity varies by manager. And so you're having different employee experiences for your team, which can lead to turnover. Systems live in things like Slack threads, right? Instead of being clearly documented in like shared folders for everyone to see. And growth, whether it is programmatic or fundraising or financial, right, starts to outpace the infrastructure, making it really hard to fix in the long run. Okay. So if we move to the next slide. So then the question becomes like, what do you do, right? What does strategic HR really look like in these types of organizations, right? And where we want to be setting yourselves up for success and minimizing a lot of that strain and fragility that your organization might have. And so at my firm, at Ascend People, we really try to focus on HR as a critical capacity infrastructure. And I kind of see it as like the operating system beneath the mission, right? So when we think about strategic HR, it usually includes things like clear accountability structures, right? So I think the thing that creates the most conflict, we talked about it early, is like not setting the right expectations up early. What are you expecting people to do, right? How will they be held accountable? When will they be held accountable? So you can do this through, right, like your goal setting processes, through performance evaluation processes throughout the year, and even just more informal feedback mechanism, meeting agendas, things like that, and starting to just establish some clear accountability structures where you're communicating to people what you expect, how it's expected to be done, documenting it, and then tracking that progress. Documented policies and systems. And so I see this happen a lot, and I know it can kind of seem like it's not a big deal until it is, but you want to have your employee handbook done, right? It needs to be updated annually because there's lots of laws federally, statewide, and even at the local level, local jurisdictions that will change and impact your team. So we need to make sure those are staying up to date and where everyone is looking at those policies to drive like what is expected of us and how things get done in our organization. And so by having a central location of those things documented where people can go visit, understand it, quickly acclimate themselves to it, it lessens the opportunity for like problems to come up. This next one is a huge thing, train and equip supervisors, right? So we want to make sure that supervisors have not only the kind of the subject matter expertise, skills that they need to do their jobs, but how they engage with their staff, right? How they engage as supervisors or direct reports. And so this is often a miss for a lot of organizations where you assume that folks just know how to supervise people. And it's probably one of the hardest skills to learn and to evolve over time. So we want to make sure they're not only getting like general management practices, right? But some of that in-depth, like how do you give effective feedback? What are some of the HR 101s that they need to know about employment law and things like that, and be able to like jump on it when they see it. If there's a harassment complaint or if there is a disability accommodation that comes up, they need to know how to deal with that, and that they really are the front line of risk for your organization. So you want to make sure you're getting ahead of that and making sure that they are equipped to do their jobs effectively to protect the org. The next piece is around equitable market informed pay. And so this is a really important point because you want to be able to communicate through a philosophy or a policy to your team around what does pay mean for us, right? So I will often see times when we have staff who come and say, we need, my pay is not as much as this organization over there, but your organization is $1 million, direct service organization, and they're comparing themselves to a $10 million, national organization. And you say like, we're not in the same ballpark, right? So we want to understand kind of what is your unique organization's context for pay and what your ability to pay is and what the market is locally, and for the jobs that they're doing, and then try to pay that, right? And in the case that you may not be able to match the market has moved a lot over time. And we want to try to pay people fairly. And I know most of the nonprofits that I work with are like, we want to be generous, not just fair. But it's really difficult to keep up with that. And so a great way to support that, and when you can't do it, is just being really explicit and transparent with your team about what you can and cannot do and why. And that can go a long way to help people kind of, be okay and understand, right, like how your pay structures work. And then the last piece is the proactive compliance management. And so, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you want to make sure you're staying on top of those compliance pieces, the laws that are changing, the requirements, particularly as you grow. As a 5-person org, you may not be responsible for being compliant with certain laws, but if you add 2 more staff, it might now set you at a threshold where you need to start looking at that kind of stuff. So you want to be on top of it. I've had organizations get like $1,000 fines for not adhering to certain compliance things. And so it's really important so that you're not seeing that risk. And as Peggy mentioned, right, like a lot of that gets out to your funders and things like that. So we want to try to get ahead of that as well. So again, I am under the feeling that HR is a critical mission aligned work, right? It's a mission aligned department, even though folks it's like, oh, it's just the place, but like our organizations run on by people. And so I do think that HR really enables sustainable growth across functions, across your organization. And so like when we think about like the marketing piece, right? Like it really starts with role clarity, who's doing what, right? Like who's going to get the message out, things like that. Fundraising consistency, as Peggy mentioned, requires staff stability, right? You've probably all experienced where funders will drop because the person who held that funder relationship is no longer there. Tech systems depend on defined workflows. So there's been so many times when you might have a payroll system and then you're trying to get information to this other system for like reporting, et cetera, and you can't do it because you haven't defined those workflows. So we need to make sure that happens. Change management requires trained leaders, right? It's one of the biggest things to do. And then culture determines adoption and execution. So really HR is the connective tissue there. And I'm hopeful that y'all will start to kind of think through that a little bit more and figure out where you can kind of prioritize your time to move the needle from an HR perspective.
Great, thanks, Whitney. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how nonprofit leaders have to wear many hats, especially driving their mission, serving the community, but the expertise and the diligence for getting the funding and managing the people, recruiting the right people is critical, and they can't happen in silos. Otherwise, it all falls apart. The other important piece of all this is the marketing and communications, and we'll go through today how that really helps drive this flywheel of driving impact, which we need to report to secure funding, and with that funding, having the hiring and the capacity in place, and then repeating. So I'll go through each one of those different layers. So number one is marking the drive measurable impact. So if you have a grant and now you need to show impact, you don't want to be using old legacy systems. You really want to have a marketing plan and system in place, because if you do not hit your KPIs or your goals, that grant funding ends. And as Peggy mentioned earlier, if you haven't gotten your grant funding just yet, anything you could do to show and drive impact so you can get that first tranche. So the way we look at it is, with the advances in marketing technology, you're able to really drive and move the needle. So what you can do with, latest tools and technology, whether it's HubSpot, which is a CRM, or tying certain tools together, you could really have precision targeting of your eligible population. So we're thinking through, okay, we have the grant and now we need to drive impact. So putting a plan together where you can personalize the communication, segment your audiences, bullet two, automate each one of those workflows, and we can go into deeper detail, but we just don't want to let people know about the Rural Transformation Hub. We have to make them aware of it, educate them, get folks to go there and trust it and repeat and come back. So all of these are workflows all through different channels. Some communities respond to SMS, others email, but really being detailed and have a real-time, optimization of all that. And at the same time, the technology is advanced where you can literally take the health belief model or other behavioral science models, take it out of the lab, have the messaging, at each stage of these behavior change. If you're trying to get someone to, quit smoking or address their diabetes, whatever your mission is, there's different messaging at different times of their behavior change. And now you could actually target folks along that whole spectrum. And then the reporting. So all these tools are available now, and the folks that are using them are really making a much bigger impact. And with so many folks trying to get dollars within similar sectors that you are part of, this helps you, rise above the top. So that's the drive impact. The next slide is the market that impact. So what a lot of nonprofits, they'll respond to grants, as Peggy was saying, but how do you continue to market that impact? And it's really about putting together dashboards, whether that's on the marketing side to show your reach and the impact and how many people are registering for a program. But when you get started and start doing your marketing and executing against these dollars, it's important to have those dashboards and that data, know what you need to collect. Can you integrate it into your communications, which could lead into your case management system or learning management system? But tying all this technology together so your dashboard is being fed in real time, and or you are collecting the right data to report back. And with a lot of clients is half the battle is getting the funders, potentially new funders, stakeholders, to see the value in their investment. So a lot of marketing campaigns are geared just towards those audiences. So it's important to have a marketing plan which is tied into your data that you're collecting, so you could continue, as Peggy was sharing earlier, to let the funders know the impact and that their dollars are being spent wisely. And then finally, tying it all together, the next slide, if you're marketing your impact and you're using it to drive funding, you're going to be able to grow your capacity. But if you don't have the HR foundation in place, the human resources really tied together, as Whitney was explaining, then that falls apart. So the other thing that you could do, we look at marketing as different campaigns. We looked at driving impact so you get the data, and then marketing that data so you get more funding, and then how do you market to recruit and get the right folks in the door and hire the right people. And that's separate campaigns, but again, you could use the same system. So using your CRM, and just like we said with marketing to the community, it's marketing to folks to hire them and having those campaigns in place. And then with the folks that you've hired, the second lens to look at this is how do we promote our people who work for us? How do we promote the people we're serving to to recognize them and enabling, giving them the tools to do their jobs, to market, to impact, but also recognize them in your communications, and using marketing that way as well. So you're building not just your organization up within the eyes of the community and the funders, but also you're elevating all the folks that work with you and recognizing them in your communications. Next slide. So hopefully that was helpful, but that's kind of the lens that we look at and that flywheel. And I want to give you an example of how that has worked. So for the Department of Labor, they get a lot of federal funding to promote OSHA, which is Office of Health and Safety. So we developed a campaign where we had to showcase how many different businesses signed up for a free consultation to avoid fines, and a lot of different metrics that had to be measured. And to do so, the federal government would continue to fund on a statewide level. So putting together the marketing plan, putting together the different communication channels and funnels to do just that. So that was step number one. Next slide. As I was mentioning, with the latest tools in marketing and technology, in this case, I'm using HubSpot as an example, is if you have all this on one platform, you can then market to all your different audiences. So the goal here really is to drive impact and participation in this program. And we don't want to measure vanity metrics. Oh, great, we got 1 million impressions. At the end of the day, we need to enroll folks. So using a system such as HubSpot or tying together others, you can really create everything that you need. So you'll have your marketing hub, your service hub could be your case management system. Sales hub would be something that the consultants would go out with. But tying all these pieces together into your marketing, which could feed data, so you could, from an HR perspective, look at your capacity building, and then from a grant and fundraising perspective, you'll have the data that you need to know if you're on course and what you need to do. So things, within the last 2 or 3 years, technology's advanced to do that. So for this next slide, what we're showcasing here is, whoops, 1 second. So what that means is when you're marketing and really trying to now drive impact for the funds that you've received, for some folks, it's an afterthought of, oh, great, we got the money. Now let's put out some social media. But it really needs to have a plan that ultimately drives and using numbers and the math to get you to your KPIs. So from a top funnel, awareness, that's your social media posts, your paid media, you're getting awareness out there around your program. And then mid-funnel engagement, that's great. People are seeing your social media posts. They're seeing your ads, but you want them to come to your landing pages. This is where they get educated. This is where engagement happens. This is where you can start to capture people's information. In this case, this was a B2B campaign targeting businesses. So we had different segments around beauty salons, restaurants, all different segments, and they each had their own landing page and campaigns because we needed to get these folks to enroll in this program and make the content, relatable to them. And now with, AI and automation, you're able to do that. So when someone sees an ad, it's geared towards them. The landing page is geared towards them, and the email workflows at the bottom of the funnel to get them to actually register for this program. That's all automated and personalized. So the technology's there, and it's a big difference. If 2 different fundees get the money from the federal government or from wherever, and you're using the most up-to-date marketing automation and personalization software, and someone else in your industry is not, you're going to really move the needle and be able to be the North Star as far as generating funding. So that's on the front end. Next slide. and just as an example, and this is something that funders like to see as well, but trying to show folks or the funders how you're actually going to drive all this, and you can map out, this is the segment I'm going after, this is the messaging, this is the workflow, and this is how we're going to move the needle on the social determinants of health or registering folks into a workforce program. But funders want to know how you're going to do it, not just say, well, we'll put, $100,000, $20,000 into marketing. There needs to be a plan. And then finally, it's impact. And like we were saying, you want to show impact in terms of, the actual KPIs of that grant that you're getting folks into these systems or registering for this training or whatever the grant may be, showing that impact. And then on the next slide, on the back end, knowing in real time how all these different KPIs that are associated with the grant are working. And that's something from a marketing lens you really need to look at. So you'll red light, yellow light, green light. The red lights will go off if you're not registering enough folks or if people are dropping off right before they finish a training, right? So having that data and dashboard is going to be super helpful. And then finally, that's on the one end. And on the back end, especially around the HR standpoint, is how are we driving efficiency? Where can we save hours? Are people in the right place? So if you get the funding and you're moving along the course to execute against it, knowing, using AI, using technology, where can you put in automation so the folks that you do have and that you have hired are doing the things that they do best. And you can measure that now as well. So what we've worked with a lot of nonprofits now is not just, yes, we're hitting the KPIs as far as, this grant goes, but we're efficient. And if you continue to give us money, we will do this more efficiently than anyone else. And oh, by the way, we'll be hitting these KPIs. So, to tie it all together, marketing, HR, and resource development really all work together. And with the latest tools and technology and all three of these pieces working together, you can really drive not just the funding, but have folks in the right seats. They're performing well, and the funding will be sustainable. So that all goes back to wearing many hats. Anyway, I'll open the floor now for questions for Peggy and Whitney. I know we don't have they had 10 or 15 minutes to go through all this, but I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, so I'll turn it over.
Well, I see a question from CE Pattern. Maybe this is for Whitney. When you talk fairness, equity, and market matching, can we talk about whether that actually work when comparing title, scope, and level of effort?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Um, so can we talk about whether that actually works when comparing title, scope, and level of effort? So yeah, I mean, I think the way that we think about those things is in what people's contributions are to the work, right? And recognizing that there's like a difference in complexity, the scope of responsibility, the challenging nature of work, in that there needs to be an equitable kind of like contribution and reward for those people and how they engage in the work. So we will often suggest that organizations kind of take that into consideration when it comes to how you pay folks. What does that mean in terms of how you compare folks' roles in the market? It's all about the content of the role, all the things I just mentioned, all those factors to determine that. And I think that is the most fair and equitable way to think about HR practices, is in what is their contribution to the work and the level of effort, work, complexity required to do that, and giving them the pay and the room commensurate with that contribution. So I don't know if that answered your question. I'm happy to follow up.
Awesome. It will help me. One thing you said, that HR is it's human dealing with humans. And that's what we're doing in the nonprofit sector. So I thought that was brilliant. Zach or Jason, do you see any other questions?
Yeah, Joe, we had a question here. Joe, have you found AI or specific AI platforms to be consistently accurate? I guess this could apply across the board, just for the accuracy of AI platforms.
Sure. What we're seeing is, I mean, you have your the AIs of the Claude and the Chat GPTs of the world. They're not always going to be accurate. There'll be some hallucination, and it's important to check everything. I think a big sh shift in the industry is the AI is now being built in all the tools that you might be using. So if you have a grant station or a fundraising platform or Canva, all these tools that you may be using now are having AI built into them to really help make them more efficient. And that's the automation side of the fence, which I think is really going to be helpful for everybody. But it's never going to be 100% accurate. So it's always good to have that human in the loop and to check. Peggy, I'm sure you might see this on the grant writing side as well.
I think to your point, Joe, with the grant writing side, I think if there is a shift and we are looking at with even our staffing, right? And this is where you might be able to give people some idea where they can go. It's evolving so rapidly, we are having trouble to keep up with it, right? That there are all these tools coming in, these tools are helping, there's new applications there, and it would be really easy. I mean, to Whitney's point, this is how this all blends together to start just buying up apps or buying up programs or sending your team to training to try to keep up with all of it, right? I think there's almost like a feeding frenzy. And so the question is that maybe it's important for each group to have their own process of how they're going to vet and include or integrate AI tools into the work that they're doing. And make sure that those AI tools or the tools that you're using can be used across your business, that it makes sense, and that your team's using similar tools so that things don't look just disconnected. And find a way to make sure you keep up to date. I think TechSoup's one way to do that, right? Up to date on what is going to be used or most relevant for your organization if you're a small nonprofit versus a large, because sometimes you can't afford the same thing based on a small versus a large, right? And so, maybe one of the questions that you're bringing up, and maybe some of the things that might be even helpful to this group, is how do we vet that? What are some of the recommendations? Where can we find those recommendations? Because this isn't everybody's cup of tea. This is like a Tapp Network's cup of tea, right? And it's really difficult when you don't know enough about all of it to integrate it within your own organization, whether you're small, medium, or large. Yeah, those are my thoughts, Joe.
Great. Thanks. Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, we work with a lot of organizations to put together governance boards for AI. And then, the process there is to look at operations, communications, technology stack, and where AI can be most effective, and then pilot these and then continue to evolve. But it's something that, we all of us need to continue to stay on top of.
Joe, I just saw this next question that came up, and it was actually where I was going to go with it. Is this question that says, I had a staff member recently describe working on structured prompts in order to get the LLM to do what we wanted with quality. An LLM, for those that don't know, is a large language models. Can you describe how you structure your prompts in each of your fields? So what I was going to say around the AI question is that, we HR is using it more and more. And I know that there's a lot of organizations who are going to AI to ask questions about how to deal with this or how does this law apply here and all that kind of stuff. So we know that it's happening. And so where I find the most advantage is being able to structure your prompts to be really specific with the AI of what you're trying to get back, right? And so that's where I see the minimizing of hallucinations or inaccuracy coming when you can be very structured with what you're asking it to do. And so for the work that we're doing, right, like from an HR perspective, it would, you can really prompt it out to be really explicit around like, I have this employee issue that's happening. This person is based in this location, right? So being clear that you're looking at this particular state and whatever, local or laws that are coming up. Here's the issue that we're trying to solve for, right? This is where I want you to give me, we're talking about performance and not compensation, whatever, and we're structuring that. And the AI can be very, very effective when you get to that level of granularity. I think the problem is that if you're not already like an HR expert, right, where you can direct it to know, right, like I'm talking about this and not about this, I think that's where you have challenges and where it can be less accurate. But I think where you have subject matter expertise that can really structure your prompts really well, it can be very effective for your work.
Great. Thank you, Whitney. Yeah, from a marketing standpoint, what we do is we set up projects and put all the information about a client, even, when we do it for ourselves. So we have, the role framing, act as a brand strategist for a category company competing against. So we help people walk through that. What's the role? What's the context inputs? And then the constraints. What's the tone? Avoid cliches. Don't use emojis, maximum word count. And then the output structure of, is this Facebook, LinkedIn, things of that nature. And then we have a loop where it goes back and questions itself to make sure that it's within tone, it's within voice, it's within structure. So there's different ways to prompt it, but we can share some of those with you as well. Just give us a shout.
Yeah, and Joe, isn't there when we talk about marketing, I'm just going to bring this up really quickly because there are mechanisms you can use that link all of that. So you're having one post that goes across multiple streams. So, having someone who is managing that within your organization, but managing it smarter, right? And then using that to craft some of the grants that you write, like actually being able to consolidate that information and some of those things that are published about your organization and the great things that you're doing to put that information in one spot and then being able to push it out for your applications so people can see the level of the footprint you have, right? I mean, then you almost appear bigger even though you might be wearing all those hats, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. And you can then, like, if you do have that source of truth, if you're putting all those templates in there, ultimately you can go back and measure which ones were successful, right? So you can pull language and then begin to analyze and have the AI analyze the ones that won, the ones that failed, what was their similar language, and continue to evolve it. Great. So the next thing on our agenda here, so we'll have some resources. I'd love to reach out. Just feel free to reach out. So if you go to TechSoup and you click on services, website services, digital marketing services, or AI for nonprofits, that's Tapp Network and TechSoup in partnership. I will get those forms that you fill out, and we can continue the conversation around these different areas. Love to help. And then Whitney, if you want to give some background on the nonprofit guides.
Yeah, so we have on ascendpeople.co, we have a number of really great resource guides specifically for nonprofit organizations and how to engage with a lot of HR information. So we have several out there, so feel free to go out on our website. You can look around. We have lots of blog information that I think has been really helpful for folks. So feel free to take advantage of those free resources for your organization.
And if you need any help with your strategic planning, if you need help with program development, if you need support in thinking through what is a communication plan or even a resource development plan looks like in your organization, or you're not even sure where to start, let's talk. We can help you think through that, support that, and actually put into place some of the best practices. If you are not, and let me just put this out there, a member of your own nonprofit organization in your state. Like in Delaware, there's Delaware Alliance for Nonprofit Advancement. In Maryland, it's Maryland Alliance for Nonprofit Organizations. These organizations have a lot of resources for some of your infrastructure, as well as they give you opportunities and insight into grants and funds that may be available within your and your state and outside of your state network. They usually have a grants piece that'll allow you to go in and search for grants. So if you're not a member, think about joining those. Those are free services once you join the membership, and it usually is a sliding scale fee based on the size of your organization. So let me just put out a shout out there. We all have really great ways to help you, but there's also other opportunities within each of your states.
Great. Thank you, everybody. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out. We put everyone's email address in the chat, and Aretha will be sending out the presentation and the recording as well. Thank you.